Are you a data-driven business looking for resilient infrastructure, connectivity, and the power to compute sustainably? KO Data's scalable state-of-the-art facilities support the mission-critical workloads of life sciences, biotech, and AI startups in Cambridge. To find out how we can help host your compute, get in touch at kodata.com/contact. Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast, talking all things technology from the heart of the UK's tech capital. Here are your hosts, Faye Holland and James Parton.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Faye. So, James, how's your week been?
It went a little bit awry from my original plan, unfortunately. So I got an insect bite over the weekend and I got an allergic reaction to it. So I've kind of been laid up all week on antibiotics, trying to get the infection under control. So the week has been a bit disrupted, lots of working from home, but we did have the Everything Blueprint event with James Ashton on Wednesday at the Bradfield Centre. So great to have James in Cambridge after talking to him a few weeks ago about the book. And he was signing copies at the Bradfield Centre this week, which was great. How's your week been?
Well, before my week, sorry about your bites. That must have been deeply unpleasant. Glad you stayed at home, not being horrible, but there you go. And, also talking about bugs, Cambridge Angels pinged me a note at the start of the week about a company called Spotter that are here in Cambridge, and they have a solution to bed bugs. So I know yours weren't bed bugs, but if anyone wants to know, there's bed bug tech in Cambridge as well, if you can actually believe that.
We'll have to do an episode on bug tech.
Yeah, I'm sure that Spotter would be very happy to do that. Anyway, so yes, thank you. My week. I think the big thing for this week was the Innovate Cambridge event, which I missed you at.
Yes, really disappointed I couldn't make it, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. It was a really good mix of people. I think they had about 500 people registered to go to the Guildhall in the centre of Cambridge. And it was a really packed room and actually a good mix of people. So you had kind of the regular lot that will always go to these kind of events. But then you had the really big companies, the innovative startups, public sector, third sector. So a really good mix of people, and actually people not just from Cambridge either. So it was interesting.
Did it take you like an hour to walk through the room because you're this podcasting celebrity now, or?
But of course, and we didn't have a banner up, so we didn't have our mug shots all over the place. But actually, I did speak to loads of people, and you can imagine there's so many of the people that we've talked to on the podcast were there as well. So yeah, it was really good. And obviously, we did the episode last week with Innovate Cambridge, and I think they're really keen to keep working with us on that and keep getting the message out there, because that was kind of the underlying thing. Innovate Cambridge are the conveners. The collective needs to actually make all of these things happen.
And George Freeman was there, right?
He was, yes. So George Freeman is the Parliamentary Undersecretary for DSIT, which is the Department of Science, Research and Innovation, for anyone who doesn't know. He gave about a 15-minute address, and I'm sure it'll appear on their website at some point in time. And it was really interesting because he was talking about the overall innovation agenda and how he's been positioning it with government and DSIT. And he basically said that there are three major points: co-investment, clusters, and Cambridge. So that was kind of, really powerful message for us straight away.
3 C's. I mean, that's kind of refreshing because we've heard a lot about levelling up over the last few years. So it's good to hear that government actually recognise the importance of clusters when it comes to innovation.
Yeah, and it very much was about clusters and places, and about using the link to Norwich to Oxford for us, about building nice places. So he made comments about, Cambridge should never be a car park that just grows for the sake of it, but a place where everyone would want to live. And he very much talked about all around the country as well. And he did talk as well about the interdisciplinary kind of side of it, which is not just technology, but what's our relationship with things like manufacturing in Peterborough and other parts of the UK as well. So his final rallying call was this.
I see Cambridge as the cluster at the heart of what we've got to do for the whole nation. So I close by saying, look, where Cambridge leads, the world follows. The nation also follows. I'm looking to you, I'm here today to say, let's work together and show the clusters around the country what you can do by linking together, yes, being a bit competitive, but mainly being collaborative. And let's show the people of Cambridgeshire that they are lucky to have this here, and we're here for them and to give the next generation the hope they need. Thank you.
I think we could literally have done a whole episode on just the people that commented in the various panels. But a few highlights. Gentleman Dr. Ant Rostron, he talked about when Microsoft were deciding where to put their first research centre outside of Seattle, and they chose Cambridge and have never regretted it. So that was a really powerful message. We had ARU, Anglia Ruskin University, talking, and actually it was really surprising to a lot of people in the room. They're really huge credentials on providing a pipeline of talent and working with the local communities. So I feel that's something we could probably come back and talk about too. We had Georgia Longobardi, who we've spoken about many times, from Cambridge GAN Devices, and Poppy Gustafson from Darktrace, who actually they were on separate panels, but independently they said practically the same thing, which is that impact is all about delivering at scale and not selling out early. And they both talked about where they were up to on their different journeys. So that was really interesting. And I think one thing that, there were a few things that it wasn't necessarily the content, but it was more like a dynamic thing. There were so many people that spoke that are now coming into Cambridge. So we know Tabitha's coming from London, Dermot's over from Ireland. Jane Hutchins moved up to run the Science Park. Debbie Prentice, now Vice Chancellor at the University of Cambridge. Peter Freeman, who's looking at Cambridge 2040. So all of these people are coming into Cambridge. And it actually really feels that external view is what will make Innovate Cambridge and this growth vision actually become a reality, because it's an inside out view rather. Whichever way around it is, I'm probably getting it confused, but I kind of found it really interesting to get those different perspectives.
Just some fresh thinking and kind of not being aware of what's happened before gives you freedom to try new things, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And I'll tell you what, there was a really humbling part of it as well, which was not intentional, I don't believe, but just bear with me in a moment. So we talked an awful lot about bringing the community in and, making sure that we are proud and enthusiastic about what we're doing, and it has an impact on the people that actually live and maybe don't work in the tech sector. And Daniel Zeichner was there. He's the local Cambridge MP. He made a really good point that not everyone is coming at it from the same starting place. And I know we're going to talk about that on a future episode in the Wealth Gap. But the reality check for me was, yes, we were all encouraged to be proud and to take a pledge and to go and make these things happen, which I absolutely support. But as I walked out of the building, it was raining and there was a row of homeless people that were being fed by volunteers. And, that to me just really drove home that point that, yes, we can have growth, but we've got to kind of level up in our own area as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as you say, there's an episode coming up shortly where we talk to some local groups that are proactively working right at the kind of coalface of some of the social problems in Cambridge. So can't wait for you to hear that episode shortly.
Yeah. But overall, it was a super positive event. They did a great job. really strong messages, and now let's galvanize and make these things happen.
Yeah, and one of the announcements that took place at the event, which was covered by national media, was the announcement of a new partnership between the innovation clusters in Cambridge and Manchester to build on existing links between the two hotspots. We'll be talking much more about Innovate Cambridge on the podcast and how that continues to drive the innovation agenda forward. But I think that's a really interesting sign of like that geographic tie-up, even though they're not particularly close to each other from a kind of geographic perspective. Obviously, they're both hotspots of the right kind of innovation, the right kind of tech talent and scientific talent. And it kind of also builds on the comment that Tony made in the interview with Tony Quested from Business Weekly, where he was seeing more Cambridge companies collaborating or opening offices in Bristol as well. So I think that's a really interesting development of this kind of national collaboration, as well as just the continued growth of Cambridge as a standalone cluster.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of other things happened in the news this week that we can share. Second Mind, Cambridge-based automotive tech pioneer. We talked to Gary in episode 50. They have scooped a major international award. The award is the Auto Tech AI Innovation of the Year Award from market intelligence company Auto Tech Breakthrough. So congrats to Gary and the team over at Second Mind.
Yeah, and also some news from another recent guest, Gerard Grech. You remember we spoke to Gerard on episode 51 and we were talking about his experiences with Tech Nation and delivering tech programs on a national scale. Well, it's now been officially announced that he's now running a new program within Cambridge Enterprise called Founders. And this is really to help university alumni start and scale tech companies. So that's a really exciting development. And again, I'm sure both Gerard and Cambridge Enterprise will be guests that we'll be continually going back to on forthcoming episodes, because there's just so much happening there.
Yeah, and I have reached out to them as well to say, come on, let's get you on the podcast and talk to you about it. So the last shout out I've got, I think is to Mantle. They have supported the first year of the podcast and they've renewed their support for the second year. So huge thanks to them. It really does make a difference to the running of the podcast. So we're very grateful for all of our supporters. So we've had quite a long chat so far, haven't we, about Innovate Cambridge. Thank you everyone for bearing with us, but it is really, it's really interesting stuff, and we hope you found it informative. But we better get on to this rather meaty episode that we've got coming up. So James, would you like to do the introductions?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great conversation and one I really enjoyed. I mean, I enjoy them all, of course, but I really enjoyed talking to Darren Garvey and Alan Patterson from BeyondMath. They both have an incredible track record of being involved in tech-based startups and larger corporations, which have often led to acquisitions. So we had so many questions for them about building companies, being attractive to potential acquirers, going through that kind of due diligence process, differences in the US and UK startup culture, the risk profile of US versus UK investors, and so much more. So let's get started. So Darren and Alan, welcome to the podcast and thank you for spending some time with us today. Why don't we start with, maybe you could just introduce yourselves so we can get a flavour of your kind of early career, where you've started and how you've ended up in Cambridge.
Okay, so I'm Alan. I'm like one of the co-founders of BeyondMath. From my background, so I started out in Glasgow. I did electrical electronic engineering as a degree, and then went down to York to do a PhD. It was the title was Neural Networks for Radar Target Recognition. So I get to say I've been in like machine learning for over 30 years. That was back in 1992. And I was in academia, I guess, for a while. I did a postdoc in Liverpool, and kind of got tired of like the kind of academic problems that we were solving, and wanted to get into the real world. And I was writing a lot of software at that time at university, and realizing that university software is not all it could be. And so like I was looking for a job where I said, well, let me get into like a commercial environment and learn how software development is really done. And I actually found a job at Nokia in Cambridge, in the business park across the road. And went down there, and they were developing like telecom switches, very formal software development. And so I was there for a year, intentionally for a year. I kind of planned I'll do a year of formal software development, and then I wanted to get into startup world. And so about a year after I left and joined a startup in Cambridge called Nexan. They were doing like medical monitoring and like home monitoring devices, and I was doing machine learning for them to do like ECG analysis and things. Unfortunately, that's one of the startups that wasn't successful. We were looking for Series B funding when the dot-com crash happened, and so money dried up. And
timing is everything.
And time is everything, yeah. And so I went across to a startup in Oxford, doing similar things. So it was machine learning for medical monitoring, and they actually they applied the same machine learning algorithm to industrial monitoring for jet engine monitoring. It was just different signals, but the same algorithm. And they actually ended up getting acquired by Rolls-Royce, who were using it for the early warning of failure in jet engines. So that was like my early days in startup world, and that really appealed to me, being in small companies and trying to solve real world problems, and very different to academia, and it was clearly my path. And so most of my career has been in startups like that.
And we're going to delve into that because you've got an amazing track record.
Yeah, I went on to, we'll go into
it
later.
We'll go into that,
so I went on to a number of startups, and then all the way up to large companies like Google and eBay. And then that leads on to we left our last startup to set up BeyondMath about just over a year ago.
And Darren?
Darren Garvey, I'm co-founder of BeyondMath as well. I had quite a different path into it. So I did physics degree. I grew up on the Wirral, kind of plastic scouser. And all my I've no formal education in software engineering or AI. I was very much just like a hobbyist hacker. I guess lucky in that I was just I was really interested in optimizing and automating what I was doing, and just kind of fixing problems with computers. And there was a lot of open source code out around, so I kind of just read lots of code and kind of learned how to program that way. And then kind of I managed to get a job up in Ellesmere Port. And I've basically been in a whole bunch of different startups since then. I mean, it was my second job that brought me down to Cambridge, where in fact Al and I first worked together. I've been in loads of different startups in completely different areas as well. I guess AI has not been the core. I kind of really sort of see software engineering as a trade. It's like a craft, and you're kind of building a toolkit, you're learning continually, and just trying to get a bigger picture of how you have these tools that fit together to solve bigger and bigger, more complex problems. That's what got me into AI. As soon as I was starting to look at huge amounts of data, then AI, machine learning, deep learning turned out to be the best tool for kind of understanding that. And it's still the case. Still a lot to learn.
Yeah, it's a really interesting area, isn't it? Because you could say you're both technologists in the AI space, but actually you then delve deeper. And so is it AI or is it machine learning or is it deep learning? And it gets, it kind of gets more and more complicated, more specific the further you go down. So talk us through a little bit more about the skill sets. I love this. You said you started as a hobbyist hacker. So we've got from one extreme to 30 years of machine learning. So tell us a little bit more about those technical skills that you've developed.
Yeah, sure. So I sort of software engineering, system design, architecture, optimization. That they were like my initial bread and butter. Distributed systems. That was kind of pure software engineering. And it was really, I kind of got lucky, and at True Knowledge, we got into AI. And that was kind of the symbolic AI, which is very different to the deep learning side of things. So, you've got the symbolic AI, and then you've got the connectionist AI, which is the deep learning. Those are two fields that are about as old as each other, but they've always kind of come in and out of favor. And then machine learning is a whole bunch of different tools. I think I don't know when it was, when the AI started being used as a term, I think there was a bit of a fight back originally by people saying, no, it's deep learning or it's machine learning. It's not AI. And I think that fight was lost pretty quickly. And it's just easier to talk about it. It's just AI.
One of James's favourite questions is about AI being in the headlines at the moment. How much does that drive you mad that, this has been out there for decades and now all of a sudden everyone's having a rant about AI? And understanding that, it's like for you and for a lot of the companies that we talk to, they'll say, we're a machine learning company, we look at tiny ML or what, they're quite specific. Do you think it should be that specific? Or conversely, does anyone care? Because actually the people who are buying this, they just want something that works and solves a problem.
That's a good question. I mean, I think, personally, I know some people get really hung up on the semantics and the terminology. I don't really mind too much because it's just the way it's going to be. Yeah, I mean, whether it's AI or not, or I think shouldn't really matter because ultimately it's a tool. We call it AI right now. It's deep learning. It may shift and change. In 5-10 years' time, it may be a completely different set of technologies. And ultimately, that doesn't really matter. What matters is what problems you can solve, what tools you use to solve it. I mean, that's always been the case with programming languages. They come in and out of favor. Symbolic AI, connectionist AI, they come in and out of favor. And I personally don't really mind what tool you use as long as it's the right tool for the job.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, there's like part of the pushback is part of the history. Originally there was AI in the 50s and 60s, which was more symbolic. They created the Lisp programming language for artificial intelligence. And we had the expert systems in the 80s. And then in the 90s, like when I started my PhD, there was a new wave of funding for connectionist systems and neural networks. And that was like a different branch entirely from the symbolic people. And so the machine learning started then, really. And there was a way, the neural networks weren't that successful in the early 90s, and we moved on to better optimization and support vector machines and other things, but it was all data, learning from data. When deep learning was successful in the ImageNet competitions in the late 2000s, you had the media hype then about how this was like superhuman performance, and everything started taking off at that point. The media started calling it AI. And so, they had people who had been in it for 20 years and had we're distinct from AI because that's the old symbolic system from the 70s and 80s. And machine learning is very different. And bringing that back again and calling machine learning AI was, that's where that kind of friction came from. But fundamentally as well, machine learning has advanced since those early days as well. And so like mixtures of, like the chat GPTs today are doing a lot of the symbolic style, it solves the problems that the symbolic systems and the language and reasoning and things like that they used to do. So AI is a good term for where machine learning has been advancing far beyond what we used to do just with learning from data. Everything's always advancing and changing, and AI is the term we use today, and that to me seems that the correct term, given that where the things like the language models have advanced to today.
I think for people who've been paying attention, who've been in the field for the last, say, 10 years, it's been clear that it's been progressing towards where we're at now. So it's kind of not a surprise that we've got to where we've got to. I'm a little surprised how quickly it's happening, but the fact that ChatGPT exists, I think the research kind of was pointing to that happening at some point. I'm surprised it only took them a year to go from GPT-3 to ChatGPT. That's quite impressive. I mean, it's moving so fast. It's impossible to keep track of everything these days. But it's also interesting, like talking to a lot of the software engineer friends I have who don't do AI, that there's still a huge amount of skepticism from them about whether it's actually a useful tool and whether it's even worth investing time as a software engineer in learning it. And I mean, ultimately, everyone should.
You still think we're just at the beginning then, in terms of you've still got substantial numbers of software engineers that aren't skilled in AI and are still slightly skeptical. So we are just at the beginning of something.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we did at Google in the early days I was there was we created a course. Like Google wanted every software engineer to be able to build their own machine learning. And they created a course, machine learning crash course. They eventually published it on developers.google. And I was involved in setting it up and teaching it to product managers and software engineers. And they wanted everyone to be able to create their own machine learning models, and they think everyone should. If you're a software engineer, you should be also learning and be capable to do, machine learning. And I think that's the right thing. If software and machine learning shouldn't really be. If you're doing software, you should be doing machine learning these days as well.
Tool belt kind of
exactly.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and just to flip back to kind of you two together, you obviously met, and you've obviously got some kind of chemistry between the two of you because you've followed each other to a number of different companies. Did you always end up thinking you were going to start a company together?
Yes, I mean we think very alike. I think we have like a similar attitude to a similar desire as well to like solve complex problems and similar interests. And so I think as we've gone through these various companies, we have continually thought about starting a company ourselves. And actually, interestingly, one of the companies, we went to eBay together. And we were actually starting a company then. And we went to eBay for funding because we thought they would be a great customer. And so they might actually fund our company. And they actually convinced us to join them and do it there.
Okay.
It was like an ex-colleague who was there. And so that's, so that was our first probably serious attempt at setting up our own company. We were looking at conversational AI back then. We come out of eBay and we were looking at better ways of doing that. And so, so early on we were thinking of doing our own company. And it was fairly natural. We're constantly talking about ideas and how to do things differently and seeing opportunities where, given what we know, where we could apply it, constantly talking about that. And BeyondMath came out of one of those conversations, where didn't hardly thought about it.
In hindsight, it's kind of, you could say it was always going to happen. And actually in hindsight, I could say, well, actually I've always been trying to learn enough to kind of go off by myself. Yeah. Save up enough money to actually not get paid for 6 months or however long it takes to actually get something off the ground. It's like true with Cambridge generally, like, there's a lot of people with just interesting ideas and a lot of people to like bounce ideas off. Some people have different appetites for actually taking a risk and actually going for them. But I mean, since Evie, 10 years ago, I guess a group of us has just been constantly bouncing ideas. And a few of them have kind of got closer to being a real thing. And then for whatever reason, you go, okay, there's another company doing it, or various reasons why you just think, okay, now's not the right time. And you keep moving on. Eventually an idea sticks.
I guess you're kind of describing some of the benefits of being in a cluster. You've got a high density of software engineers and technical people, the university and the kind of, the kind of academic element of what's happening in Cambridge. It just kind of all comes together in that soup, doesn't it? And you've got the right kinds of people to have the right kinds of conversations.
Yeah, I mean, it's what's kept me here. When I was looking for jobs, that the one I found here, the one that brought me down here, I was looking for jobs anywhere in the world, and it just so happened that the most interesting idea and the most interesting people were here. And for, I guess, the same reasons, I'm still here.
The Cambridge soup, as James has just called it.
Copyrighted. Yeah.
Love it. And I'm interested in the dynamic between both of you. Do you agree? Are you on the same page? Do you challenge each other? Is there a certain dynamic? You're nodding and shaking here.
Yeah, I mean, dialogue, discourse, we're always arguing. We think alike, but in complementary ways, and we make progress through arguing through points, and like taking devil's advocate and arguing through points, and that works really well. That's like a really valuable relationship to have in terms of building a company, because you're continually pushing the edges and the boundaries of what's possible and what's right and what's wrong, and disagreeing and justifying why you disagree. So, like, in terms of discourse and, how you make real progress, I think, in companies, when you're pushing the boundaries and you're trying to invent new things, you have to argue and have discourse and push, justify why you think you're right, or why you think he's wrong, or and continually push against each other. I would make just agreeing and without really justifying and really pushing the argument, it doesn't really help. And especially in startups, like I say, when you're trying to invent something new, it really takes a lot of that. And so I think we got on really well at that. First of all, we get on really well, personally, but we also very good at like pushing each other, to justify everything and argue all the time, which is
robust engineering discussion.
That's a good term for it.
And do you encourage that robust engineering discussion within the team as well? Does it go throughout the business?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, not explicitly, in that you can't tell people they have to disagree, but I think we just naturally do. I mean, one thing I've long thought is that whatever opinion I come up with, if I think I've got a good idea, he'll instantly be like, nah, it's crap for these reasons. I think similarly, if I think, this is a terrible idea, you might find a good side of it. And maybe it's a bit of a Scouser, Glaswegian kind of thing, but I think we've never had any qualms about being extremely blunt with each other without ever taking it personally.
Radical candor.
Radical candor, yeah.
That's what Americans call it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess one thing I remember someone referring to us once was like, we're like an old married couple, which I thought was kind of initially insulting, but then realized actually, no, it's probably not a terrible description.
Well, as an old married couple myself, I think it's all right. Don't take offense at it. So how does that ethos help you build teams? How do you carry that through?
I mean, I think the key point, and we are huge believers in this with teams, is about empowerment of the team, open transparency, and empowering the team. The team for us are equals, and they question us just as easily as we question them. And we really encourage, empowerment of them, so they. Another term for it, and Google used to use this, the lunatic should run the asylum. And we are massive believers in that. So we are never telling people what to do or what opinions to have. It's all like open, they can decide what to do. Our job as leaders for them is being open, transparent about what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve, and what problems we have, and how much runway we have, and let them solve the problems themselves and decide what we need to do. And so when we're arguing with each other, we're all arguing with them, and they are learn to be quite open with us as well. And so it's almost like equals in that terms of, and so you get this kind of combinatorial gain from everyone having discourse with each other and really working out everyone's opinion and thoughts are equally valid. We've done it multiple times now in building teams in Cambridge. We did it for eBay, we did it for HomeX, both highly successful teams.
Yep.
And we're already seeing it with our new hires here, that it's just incredibly powerful when you have that openness and transparency. So they feel comfortable to argue with us, even though we're the founders and we've hired them.
I mean, that must be really attractive as a potential employee to have that ability to contribute and to shape things, because, as we all know, there's no shortage of options for people to go work in big companies in Cambridge. So, that must be one of your competitive advantages of having that style of culture that attracts the right kind of people.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're surprised by it when they come in. There's some people are uncomfortable with it as well at first, because they tend to be waiting to be told what to do and sort of deferring to you. And then they get quite comfortable with it, and then they actually feel empowered and say, actually, I can decide what we do here. And I think this is the right thing to do, and I'll stand up and say it. And then other people will have a discussion around it. And they very quickly learn that they are in control of what we do as a company, and we're all trying to solve the same problem, and we all have a fixed runway, that we're all on the same boat together. And it's surprising how quickly they learn, and how progress accelerates really, really quickly when everyone has the same input.
Alan, do you think that there's a tipping point though, because that works really well in the startup world, in the businesses that you've been, is there a point where actually you can't do that, or you've got to change that dynamic?
I might be wrong, but I strongly think no. Okay. I think it's one of those things.
Some radical candor.
Oh, okay. Are you arguing with me?
So why? Yeah, the why. I think it takes a huge amount of effort to kind of maintain it, because you do get people that come in and go, okay, well, mistakes might happen. Someone might make the wrong choice and go down the wrong path. And someone might know better and go, if I'd known that, I could have fixed it for them. And there is this kind of natural tendency to have more and more organization, more and more kind of structure and hierarchy, where the more senior people are on top, and the more junior people who know less are down below. And that, I think, it creates a massive bottleneck, a bandwidth problem in terms of just actually communication. I mean, it's a cliche. Netflix have they nailed it, and that it's like you hire smart people and have them tell you what to do, as opposed to the other way around.
Small teams in engineering have been so successful, hasn't it? Rather than big, cumbersome organization and that kind of continuous shipping.
An example of the biggest organization, Google do exactly this, and they run exactly like this. The lunatics do run the asylum. I think that's in like Laszlo Bloch's book. He was a VP of people operations there. And when I was there was 80,000 employees. Yeah. And managers and leaders never tell engineers what to do. They just need to be transparent and unblock and help them do what they want to do. Yeah. But it's always from the bottom up, and it works superbly well. The rate of progress I saw when I was there just was amazed me. And that's 80,000. So it can work all the way to the top. What the problem you tend to get is with managers who'll come in and say, but how do I know they're going to do the right thing if I'm not telling them what to do? And so you have to learn to cede control. And for leaders and managers, that's difficult for some people to get their head around. But when you do it, you see the benefits of it. And your job as a manager or a leader is really to help people, and to unblock them and give them the context they need. And play your part in it. You're obviously contributing as well as a leader, but it works all the way up to Google. So I don't think it is necessary that you need formality, in management and hierarchy, and that thing that works in a small startup can't scale up. I think Google proved otherwise.
Good point. So James talked a little while ago about your laundry list of success. So let's run through a few of them. So correct me if any of these are not right. So Eevee Technologies acquired by Amazon, now part of Alexa. YouView TV, now part of BT TV. Grapeshot acquired by Oracle. HomeX acquired by Service Titan. Spider.io acquired by Google. Any more?
Yeah, Oxford Biosignals was my second startup in Oxford. That was acquired by Rolls-Royce, part acquired by Rolls-Royce. That was my second startup. So what have you learned from all of those? And is this the ambition you've got next? You're just going to keep doing this?
There's one aspect which is like, what have I looked for in companies? Like one thing is finding companies that are just really smart people. Like the smartest group of people I can find, and they're solving a real problem, a problem that I kind of believe is a real problem. And that's kind of one of the signals I've always looked for in companies. And that's kind of ended up working out, right? If you get a group of smart people, they're empowered to do the right thing and they're trying to solve a problem and they're grounded, then it's not guaranteed to work out, but there's a higher probability of it working out.
It's interesting there because I guess what you're saying there is you're effectively interviewing the companies rather than you're going as the candidate. They've got to convince you that they're worth working for. Yeah,
and that's not to say that I always felt like I was guaranteed a job because I was coming with very few qualifications. But yeah, it should be very much a two-way thing.
But it's the right mindset, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think, again, another thing I think, when you talk startups and entrepreneurship, everyone gets obsessed with the founders, but obviously not many people in the entire tech workforce ever get to be a founder. So I think it's really interesting, to understand as an individual contributor or as a leader of a team within an organization, how you spot those opportunities and what kind of signals you're looking for. Because I guess a lot of the people listening to the podcast might never, ever found their own company. So we'll certainly come on and talk about you becoming co-founders of your own business. But I think it's quite interesting to spend a little time just thinking about it from a non-founder perspective.
I mean, for me, I've always looked for interesting problems first. I'm kind of interested by, you see new ways of doing things. So, I don't like more of the same. So I'm always looking at how we can transform things. And it's why I continually look at startups, because they're continually trying to do something in a different way. And so, if I think back to my very first startup, they were trying to do telemedicine. It wasn't done then. We didn't have smartphones back then. And they were building their own PDAs and doing telecoms and trying to monitor heart failure patients in the home.
Yeah.
And nobody was doing it. It was a modem you used to dial up to send the data to the cardiologist. And I thought, well, we can do this, right? This is possible today. And yet we're not. And so I could see a real opportunity to do something different. And that's been true in everything I look for, especially in startups. It's just, how do we take something that's possible today, might be possible today, and transform something in a way that actually has impact on people's lives, a different way of doing things, something, improve things for the better. It sounds kind of cliche, but it's but it's the real core of value, right?
Intellectual challenge and the technical challenge of doing something new, with something you believe in terms of the application of that.
Yeah.
Never thinking about the exit or the possible of an exit. That's just, I guess that goes in hand, because if you believe in the product and the product market fit, then that comes down the line anyway, right?
Yeah, very much. I think I've never optimized for salary, and I think companies shouldn't really optimize for exits. I think and that's not because I was born rich. Like, I was earning nothing in my first few jobs. But it's more like if you just work with good people on a real problem and you just try and do as good a job as you can and learn along the way, then everything hopefully will just work out.
Yeah.
I think value in money comes out of what you're doing. It's not the goal of what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's a result of creating value or creating change or creating new ideas or products that creates value, which creates money. And so if you're focusing on the money as a starting point, I think you've got the wrong goal. If your goal is to exit, then how does that tell you what to do to exit? Whereas if your goal is to create a new way of monitoring health patients, then you've got clear guidance as to what value you're trying to create, and exits come out of that. You're creating value that other companies that are then interested in, or other investors or buyers are interested in acquiring that value.
Yeah.
But your goal should always be, what am I actually creating that's worthwhile?
See, I like that. It's quite a challenge, because we often hear that you should start with the exit in mind, which you're going completely the opposite, which I would expect from our conversation so far. So when do those triggers appear? Is it based on, people actually buying the technology? How do you actually spot those triggers then that lead to the acquisitions?
I've had different ones. I've had like the very first one was with Rolls-Royce. They were protecting the technology. They were funding the research at the university, and they wanted to stop GE getting access to technology. So they want to protect it. And there was quite a close relationship there. Others, you're just working, you're creating your value, creating your company, and you're starting to get noticed, and they contact you. So it's not too different actually to like VCs when you're trying to raise. They'll contact you and you'll set up a meeting and you'll talk and you'll sell what you're doing to a VC. And like most of the exits I've been involved in have been like that. An acquirer calls you and says, "Are you interested in M&A talks? We really like what you're doing," and then you'll have a call and discuss what you're doing. So it's never been in our plan in any of the startups we've done where you're focused on how you're going to exit. They've contacted us.
I mean, you've only got so much mental capacity. So you can either spend that time, thinking about the competition or thinking about, the other people that might try and buy you, or you can just kind of spend all your effort on actually building value.
I'm sitting here thinking of multiple companies that we know they're juggling so many balls. They're trying to fundraise, or they're trying to hire, or but actually they focus on the technology first, on the need, what's the issue, and then the technology that will serve that need. And that's, probably very sound advice.
Yeah. I mean, I think with exits and things, you need to have a awareness of the landscape, especially when you're talking to VCs and trying to raise, so you have to have like potential exits that could be on the companies that are in your space that might be interested, and even all the way up to IPOs and what the potential outs are. Like we say, you're never driven by those goals.
I guess a similar related question. With so many kind of successful acquisitions, were you never tempted to just assimilate into the acquiring company and build a career within somewhere like a Google? Because, I mean, obviously the opportunity would be endless in terms of the directions you could go. You've always wanted to come out and then start over fresh.
That's a really good question. And some of my colleagues from like Spider are still in Google and worked their way up the chain. For me, there's a part of an acquisition where I think you should only be selling your company to someone like Google if you believe you can achieve more through doing so. And therefore, you can still work to build that up. And it's a reasonable path to scale up much larger. Inside Google, you have a lot access to a lot more funds and a lot more compute and everything else that allows you to scale up to huge scale. For me personally, I'm always interested in that going from nothing to something, that early stage of a startup where you're changing something and not necessarily optimizing and going for large growth.
Yeah.
So my interest has always been in that initial spark, I guess, and how do you create the change? And so I've never really been interested in a long career in a single company. I'm always looking for problems to solve and new things to create. And so it wasn't that difficult to go off and try something new again.
I mean, I've ended up kind of leaving. I left Evie around the time the Amazon acquisition was happening. I left Grapeshot at the time the Oracle acquisition was happening. And that was kind of coincidental. I mean, I wasn't intentionally leaving at that point for any particular reason, except I think a lot of people in software, they're constantly keeping their eye out for opportunities.
Yeah.
And sometimes, opportunities just come around that you can't turn down. And that's just happened to be at the time. But, one common theme with most of the companies I've been at is they've been quite chaotic, and it's not been obvious that they're going to work. In the days of Evie, I mean, we got like a bridging loan. We had 6 months. We got bacon butties on the infinite Coke, Coca-Cola on the on the table every morning, and we were just hacking, non-stop trying to get that working. It ended up being a huge success.
Yeah,
but it was not at all obvious that was going to be the case.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to be willing to accept a level of chaos. Some people they get to a different stage in their lives when they're like, okay, this would be quite nice actually. I'll take the stock, I'll let it vest, and I'll kind of be part of a bigger organization. And a lot of people are still at Amazon. A lot of people from Grapeshot still at Oracle.
You're making me think I'm getting close to retirement. Maybe I should be doing that. Maybe this is
not yet. It's not going to happen.
Those experiences, they've given you some exposure both in the UK to the startup ecosystem and also the US. Do you find them to be different, and why?
Being an engineer in a startup, say, in the US and the UK, I don't think any different. It's the same chaos and the same problem solving and the same kind of environment. I think where the big difference comes in is more the investment and the appetite for risk. I think there's not a difference in startup culture in terms of it's more formal and more risk averse to be in a startup in the UK. They're just as chaotic and with a short runway. And I like to describe it as especially when you have a short runway, it's like jumping out of a plane without a parachute, and you're hurtling towards the ground, and you need to grow wings before you hit the ground, and you think you know how to do it, but nobody's ever done it before. And it's a bit like that, and that's the same in the UK as in the US, and that kind of culture is the same, and the engineers I know in either environment are very similar. I think where the big difference comes between the US and the UK is the VC culture, the actual investment culture.
Yeah, and that probably plays into ultimately what happens in startups. In how big a vision you can maintain as you continually fund. I mean, it's I guess long been known that a lot of the really big successful UK companies, they end up getting more and more investment from the US, and a lot of the time even move over there. It's kind of a shame that there isn't the same appetite here to kind of just think big and put money behind big ideas. I mean, it's one thing we notice a lot talking to investors, that difference between the UK / European, very much, let's get revenue, very small changes, incremental build up. Don't raise too much money. It's the attitude. It's much more. You could say, I imagine they would say mature, risk averse kind of approach. But then, you speak to West Coast or East Coast VCs, and, you come away from the conversations just thinking, wow, I thought I was thinking big, but they're just thinking next level big. Yeah. And, it's a lot easier to pare down an idea into a simpler, more tangible thing. But you've got to be able to think big enough, and that's so true with the US.
And that's true with our fundraising. Our lead investors, US, we're looking at our next round, and all the investors that are have an appetite for what we're doing and think big are all US or mostly US.
Well, I said we do have Creator Fund as an investor in our pre-seed, and they're UK based, but they feel quite US in their kind of ambition, their outlook.
Interesting. Yeah, we spoke to them on a previous episode, 31, I think, if anyone wants to look that up. I mean, we're kind of jumping around, but I think I want to carry on that kind of conversation because we haven't actually really spent any time, talking about BeyondMath yet. So let's talk about that right now, because obviously, this is your focus right now, obviously. So, tell us what BeyondMath does.
So we're applying AI to like numerical simulation. We say like AI first approach to simulating the physical world. And it really started out from ideas that we were seeing in the most up-to-date research in AI coming out from the likes of DeepMind and OpenAI, where we were seeing progress in areas like biology and drug discovery, and especially in like using machine learning for computational problems. And my background in engineering, like I said, my PhD was in radar, and we used to do numerical simulations of radar. And it used to be on the Cray supercomputer at the university, and it would take like a week to run the simulation. And I remember thinking, that surely AI, if it's having an impact in biology and beating, being able to solve problems that computational methods haven't solved in biology, surely it's got to have something to say in engineering and simulation-based problems. And so we really started at that point and looking at investigating how that would actually work and what kind of advantages you would see. And we did some early tests on how you would do that. And we were seeing like speed ups of 300 or 400 times faster, which is big. And we said, okay, this works. And this can clearly work. Machine learning really can really transform how we do simulation. And so we left our jobs and set up the company, having looked at the market and how feasible a business is in that area. But fundamentally, at its core, that's what we're doing. We're using machine learning in a way that's orders of magnitude more efficient than the kind of numerical methods we use today for simulation. And by simulation, I mean things like fluid dynamics, so simulating aerodynamic airflow and surface pressures, and in electromagnetics, you'll simulate like radar scattering or telecoms antenna design. All these methods in engineering use these numerical methods that are today is a stereotypical high-performance computing application, supercomputing application that's hugely expensive. Yeah. They'll run on supercomputers, and they can run for days or weeks, even sometimes, to simulate like a few hundred milliseconds of real time. And so what we're looking at with machine learning is really transforming that from hours down to seconds or minutes, where it's almost like real-time simulation. It's capable of transforming that entire space. So that's like the core idea of what we founded the company on. And then from that, there's a whole raft of new advantages that we're discovering as we're developing and talking to customers and working with them.
Who's the key targets for you? How are you segmenting the marketplace? Are you focusing on specific industries?
Yeah, definitely to start with. I mean, that's one thing we remind each other of constantly is like focus, right? And how do you get from 0 to 1? I mean, we started looking at electromagnetics. I mean, that's, I had the physics background. Alan he was doing a lot of radar scattering. So we thought that's where we did our initial validation studies, and then realized that like for a startup, it's not a market we can get into easily. Like, sure, there's a lot of money in, 5G masts and, defense, stealth fighters and things like that. But it didn't seem like a fast enough moving market that it was good for startups. So, I mean, what we kind of look for is like something where we can find customers who are going to adopt new technology. So they're going to just try out new things. They're going to be able to spend money fast, to not need like giant 12, 15, 18-month sales cycles. And ideally with like a bit of a incentive, like a competitive reason that they have to actually take on this new technology. So, looking at the market, we kind of settled on CFD, so fluid dynamics. That's a massive market used in climate, used in aerodynamics, used in battery technology, used in energy. It's kind of crazy how widely that's used. But we kind of saw that automotive was like, $600 million market within that. And then motorsport was in that, and we're kind of both F1 fans. So we thought, okay, well, that might be a good place to kind of start to focus like really down on a tiny little segment where as a startup, we can kind of tick those boxes, right? We can get basically talking to some of the most hardcore users of these technologies, most like difficult problems to solve. There's money in it, and they're likely to adopt new technology and try it out. And that is where we're focusing on.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well as a startup, you're looking for early validation. So we say like early and often validation, because you want to prove the technology works, and you want to prove that you're building something that someone wants, so you can actually prove out that market. And so the likes of Formula One team, with that kind of rapid cycle of feedback and them trying new ideas out, gives you that kind of early validation, so that we know, that what we're building is actually going to work and someone actually wants it. And that helps you get off the ground from nothing to actually developing a product that someone's going to pay for. And as Darren said, that kind of focus really counts when you're starting off, because we could, if you look at the whole umbrella of opportunity, it is all the way from aerospace and space to automotive, energy, and even all the way to electromagnetics. And you can even imagine mechanics and and robotics, and even game engines, and with physics engines in games. It's just huge opportunity. You can't. The idea of even doing multiple things is just a non-starter. So that kind of focus down into one area where you get that rapid feedback, prove you can do it in one area, is exactly what you need to get off the ground. It's what investors are looking for as well, that you can execute and you can prove both commercially and technically that what you're doing works.
A question to close the gap in my knowledge. Your approach, is it more like a platform play where you can just plug in data sources from customers, or is it more bespoke and customized on a customer by customer basis?
So it's more a tool, right? So we don't want to be like consultants where we're actually solving the problems in aerodynamics. We're not aerodynamicists. So it's building like a simulation tool that they can use.
Yep.
And so they're the experts in their field, but today they'll buy like a simulation tool from one of the big incumbent companies who have been selling these tools for years.
Yeah.
And we're offering a new tool that does different things to them, but it's also orders of magnitude faster as well with the same. So we see ourselves very much as a platform play, as a tool company where
so you are providing the whole solution rather than just like improving the data pipe and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, one thing we don't want to do is, for example, so in their pipeline today, they'll have like a CAD system where they'll design the actual, and then they'll feed that into a simulation tool, and then they'll have post-processing tools as well. We don't want to be building a CAD system. That would be a huge effort. Yeah. We want to be kind of a replacement for the actual simulation tools.
Gotcha.
And ultimately, we're doing more than just what today's tools do, because the approach we are taking opens up new opportunities in terms of like design optimization, where you have the AI actually designing the part and optimizing your designs in a way that you can't do with today's tools. In terms of post-processing and CAD systems, we don't want to be doing that. That would probably kill us. They've been around since the 80s. But fortunately, of course, they've been around since the 80s, and their data interchange formats are very open. So, because all these tools can change, so it's very easy for us to fit into that pipeline in terms of, as one tool, because they all swap data with each other.
So we've talked a little bit at the top of the podcast about how you've got yourself to Cambridge. How plugged in are you into the Cambridge ecosystem?
So we're not like out at the university in Cambridge, and we might think of ourselves as not totally plugged in, but I think it's hard not to be plugged in. I think Cambridge is quite a small city, and from my perspective, it has the tech companies, it has a university, and that's kind of all. And there's no large industries or other industries in the city. And so when you know some people in Cambridge, you kind of know everyone in Cambridge, and it's hard not to be connected to everyone. You can be in the pub and be talking to PhDs in physics or tech founders or just engineers. And when you know one person, you know kind of everyone. So it's really hard not to be plugged into. And it's kind of what I love about Cambridge. It's a really tight-knit network. It's why I came back.
It's hard to not bump into someone randomly and then just get into some really deep, geeky conversation about whatever else it is.
And I wanted to come back to an earlier part of the conversation where you were explaining like you were self-taught on the tech side. We talk a lot about the kind of wealth divide in the city and opportunities for kids to break into the tech sector. Some of that feels difficult, for kids that haven't had those opportunities. We're trying to do some stuff here at the Bradfield with tech educators. What would your advice be to someone that's kind of maybe listening to this or comes across this somehow, is sitting at home, would love to be in a startup, would love to build their own software, but just doesn't know where to start?
Yeah. Well, I think, the concept of being self-taught these days is almost the only way to learn. There's a vast amount of resources out there that are free. I mean, I learned everything I learned for free, going back, 15 years. And that's easier to do today. I think with programming as well, it's really just about breaking down problems into smaller steps. And I think if you're interested in learning how to do that, how to think clearly, then you should learn how to program. I think everyone should learn basic programming, at school or even just as a hobbyist. I think you can just learn to solve simple problems for yourself. And if you find it really interesting, then you might actually sort of dig deeper, and start branching out. I'd say the same for people that are software engineers that don't know AI. Do the same thing. I think people who aren't engineers at all and they're interested in AI, there's a huge amount of resources out there, from Hugging Face to Fast.ai. They're probably good starting points just to have a play around with it. Because I think ultimately it comes down to just tinkering. You tinker and then you find stuff doesn't work, or you can't quite do what you wanted to be able to do, and then you get deeper and deeper and deeper, and you can go as deep as you like. So I'd say like a comp sci degree is like learning bottom up. You learn the fundamentals, the foundation, and then you learn everything on top. I very much learned a top-down approach. Learn to do stuff, be practical, and then you get more interested in the detail and the fundamentals.
Interesting.
I think as well that the tech companies are open to any level of education as well. I think it's more about demonstrating what you know and being able to be a good problem solver. That comes first before any education. If you're clever, you can learn on the job and you can learn what you need to learn to do the job. And tech companies are one of the industries that are very open to any level of education, I think, generally. If you're a good problem solver and you can solve it, then you have the opportunity to get into it.
It's also one thing that I think over the years, because it's historically been very male-dominated, very kind of white, going back 10, 20 years. It is kind of cool that in the last few years, it is starting to actually shift. You're starting to see the demographic change, which is kind of awesome, actually. It's still not entirely balanced, but it's definitely a different world today than it was even 5 years ago.
We've covered so many things. It's been a really fascinating conversation. So thanks to you both. But to end with, I'd really like to find out from you, what have you got coming up? What are you most excited about?
I think like AI is going to transform this world we're in terms of how we do engineering, whether it's just in speed and power and optimization. AI is going to transform it, and we want to be that company that is transforming it. And that's that thing I was talking about in startups, about changing the world and actually having an impact there.
Yeah, and we're still pre-seed, right? So we're kind of building towards our kind of first products, solving CFD, tens of thousands of times faster, and also like going towards branching out to multi-physics. So this is solving things like aeroelastics, like flexible wings, or aerothermal, which is kind of very important for batteries and hybrid technologies and hydrogen fuel cells and things like that. It's kind of heading towards this kind of like we have foundational models of language. I think both of us are very sure that it's going to happen, that we'll have foundational models of physics, where maths is the underlying language of these models, but similar kind of parallel to the large language models we have now.
So in future, like AI will be designing our cars and our planes, and they'll be more efficient for it. And so when we talk about net zero and sustainability, these kind of efficiency drives will come out of this level of optimization that we're doing with that. So it'll be interesting to see what shapes AI comes up with for what our cars will look like when they're designed by AI.
It's exciting times. Yeah.
Thank you, Darren, Alan. Thank you very much for your time. It's been great.
Thank you.
Today's show was produced by Carl Homer of Cambridge TV and supported by our media partner, Business Weekly. The Cambridge Tech Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms and on cambridgetechpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It will really help others discover the show.
If you are a startup looking to grow in Cambridge, the Bradfield Centre offers a range of flexible membership packages which put you in control of your office and home working mix. There's a vibrant, collaborative atmosphere, on-site cafe, plenty of green outside space, and regular member social events. For more information, visit bradfieldcentre.com or call 01223 919 600.